Hello, welcome to Technical Founders. My name is Carlos Lara, software engineer and entrepreneur, and in this video we'll be looking at commands in Xamarin.Forms. Now this video is a continuation from MVVM in Xamarin.Forms and data bindings. So data bindings are very powerful. They allow us to connect properties of visual elements to properties of data in the view model. So it connects properties in the view. In our case here we had a list, and its item source property here had a connection to the customer list property in the view model, which was actually getting its value here from the models. So, and this is very powerful to connect properties like this, from a visual element to model data. But not everything is a property. Sometimes you need to bind to a function or to a method. Sometimes view models here are not just exposing properties, but they're exposing methods or functions that must be called at some point. So what if we could do a binding to a function, not just a property? And that's what a command is. So let's get right into it. The best way to learn is by example. So here we're setting the customer list property in the view model statically by calling this instance method getCustomers from this class, which statically creates our list. Now we want to do it through a command, through a function that does this. So we don't want to do it here in the constructor for the view model. So we're going to go ahead and delete that. And we want to call it using a command. So first of all, here in the XAML, I've added a button at the bottom. If you click it, the idea is that it's going to generate the list only when you click that button. Right now, it's not doing anything, but that's what we wanted to do. So here in our XAML file, in our view, we have a command property there, and we are going to do a binding, and let's call it list command. It doesn't really matter as long as it's descriptive here. So we have our command property, and this command is going to be called when the button is clicked. So we have obviously the clicked event here, but we also have the command, because if we have a clicked event, we would have to put it in the partial class in the code behind file, and here we would have the event right here, and our code behind here would start to increase. And the amount of code, it wouldn't be as clean. So here we're going to keep it separated from the view and put it in the view model layer where it actually belongs. So we have our command and we have a binding to the list command. Now we need to create this property in our view model. So we go to the view model, and here we are going to create a property of type I command. So we are going to say public I command. It's a type I command. I already added the namespace here for command, and we called it list command. And it's a property, so we will say private set get. There we go. And now we need to initialize this property, and this we're going to do it here. So we're going to say list command assign new command. Here we go, and this command object is in the Xamarin.Forms namespace, which I've already added here, command. Now command has several overloads here, can take several parameters, so we'll do the first case where it just takes a function. So when this command is called, when you click a button, it's going to call some function. So you can just do a lambda function here, do an anonymous function or something, for example, but here we're just going to do a named method to make it a little bit simpler. So we'll call it get customer list. Then we close the command, and now we need to generate this method here. So here we have it, and then we don't need a parameter here. Let's go ahead and delete this. So this is actually the function that's going to generate our list. So here before we did it in the constructor. So now we are going to create a class level reference here for this this service. Let's go ahead and delete the var here, and we are going to have the customer services, and let's call it service, just as a field here at the class level, and then here we are going to assign it. That way we can have access to it outside of the constructor here. It's not a local variable, it's more of a global variable here for this class. So here, for getCustomersList, we're going to say, we're going to assign it to the customer list. So we say customer list, customer list property, and we are going to assign it service dot get customers. And that's it. So now, you have a binding to the list command here And our binding context, as we've seen before, is the view model itself, our main view model. So we create our public property here. Then we assign a new instance of the command class here, and as a parameter, it takes the action, the function that or the method that it's going to call when that command is called, when the button is clicked. And here we see this is the function that's called. It's just the one that creates the list and assigns it to the customer list property, and then we have our binding here to customer list. So let's go ahead and run the app and let's see what we get. Again, for this video, I'm going to be running just on iOS just to be quicker, but of course this all works on Android because we're doing Xamarin.Forms. So here our list is empty, of course, because we haven't we haven't called the command. So now when we click the button, now it generates our list and assigns it to the item source property, and then the bindings trickle down. So with the moment we click the button, command is called here in the view model, and this so a command has three main things. So it has an execute method, which is this. This is the first parameter. You can add another parameter, which would be the can execute. So you see for the parameters, it has execute, which is an action. It's just a function that does something. And then it has a can execute, which is a function which does something but also returns a Boolean, so returns true or false. So this can execute says, like, can this button be clicked? Is it allowed to call its execute method? So that's the other part. So this is the execute method. So when you click the button, this get customers list method is called here, and it assigns it to this, to the customer list, and because of the bindings here, the list view gets it. So all instantly the moment you click the button, this happens. It's incredibly cool. I mean, you didn't have to do this in the code behind file, or you didn't have to do it in the view model constructor. It's all done through bindings. It's just very, very beautiful, very cleanly separated. Now, what if you want to disable this button based on, let's say, you only want to call this method once. So once you click the button once and it generates, it brings everything out, then it has to be disabled. So that's when the other parameter comes in. So you have your command here, and then you can add another function, which is your can execute. That's going to return your true or false, whether you can execute or not. So let's just call it can get customers, I guess. It doesn't really matter. Let's generate the method here. And see, it returns a Boolean because this is a func, it's not an action. This is an action type, and then this is a func, which means it returns. It doesn't take any parameters here. Let's go ahead and remove this. So now we want to say, so if the customer list here, our view model property here, is null. So if it's null, then return true. So if it hasn't been assigned yet, so if it has nothing, then you can execute it, right? Like the button is enabled and you can click it, and then we're going to do an else here. So, and otherwise, so if it's not null, so if it's already been assigned, then return false. So once you called it and it assigned the list here, the static list created from the model, then you can't call it the execute method anymore. You can't even click the button. It's going to be disabled. So let's go ahead and run that. And we're going to encounter a little issue, and I'll show you what that means in a moment. So I mentioned that this command has an execute method and a can execute method, right? So once I click, it doesn't get disabled. It should get disabled, right? But Xamarin.Forms doesn't know that the can execute has changed. So we need to notify Xamarin.Forms that to change its can execute state. Its can execute state is staying the same here. We're changing it, but like Forms doesn't know. So here, what we need to do is, so here in our execute. So once we click the button and the execute method is called, then I want to change the can execute. I want to call the can execute method and tell it that now it shouldn't, or that it should. It needs to know about this. So what we're going to do is we are going to say, so our command here is list command, and then this is a type I command, and to call its properties and methods, we actually need to cast it. Whoops. So we are going to say command. So we are casting this to a command. And then let's actually do another parentheses here because we need to actually do a dot. We need to access this whole thing, dot. And here we see, so we have our execute method, which invokes the execute action. We have the can execute, which again, like I said, returns a true or false whether it can execute. Then it has other things. It has a can execute changed event. So this is raised whenever the can execute changed. And the way you raise this event is by calling the change can execute method. So this method is going to raise the can execute changed event, and that is going to notify Xamarin.Forms that has changed. And now it's going to go here. It's going to call this method, and it's going to evaluate, and it's going to return the proper value here for whether you can execute or not the button. So let's go ahead and run that. And now this time around, we're going to click the button again. We are going to call the get customer list, and then it's going to call the change can execute, which is going to call the can execute method here, and it's going to check. So we click it, and it's, see, beautifully now the button is disabled because we've already called it, and this is what we wanted. So you can, depending on what you want to do, you can disable that command, so not being able to call that function again, or just leave it be. So it really depends. But it's very, very powerful. Here we've done a binding, not to a property. So this is a property of a view of a button here, and we're binding to the list command, which is actually a function. It's calling a method or more than one method. So it's actually very, very cool. It's separated from the view again. This is actually one of the most powerful things you can do with MVVM and Xamarin.Forms using commands. And we'll get into more detail in future videos. This is a very simple introduction to commands, but you can do a command where you call, for example, a web service. For example, go to the database, get the information from a user, and populate a list or something like that. You can actually call web services, and we'll get into web services, a web API, and those things in subsequent videos. But yeah, this is and actually, by the way, before we finish, there's actually another type of command here that you can do, which is a command of type T. You see command of T, so you can say, for example, string. And the difference here, we're not going to do it for this video, but just so you know, if you give the command a type, so if you use this type of command with the type, and by the way, you would need to change it here, that's why it's red. Here in the XAML, you can say you have a command parameter property, and then you can say, for example, you can pass a string. I mean, it doesn't matter. It can be some kind of a string or some kind of variable that you want to pass. So this command parameter, basically what it does is, if your function here, not this one, but this one, if your action takes, your function, your method takes a parameter, so let's say it takes a string name, I mean, just for example, then this command parameter property, when you assign it, it's going to pass this parameter into the function. So when you call the function, whatever the value of this command parameter property is going to that object is going to be passed along here to your method, and you're going to do something with it in case you need it. So it doesn't have to be a parameterless method. You can have a method with a parameter. It can be an int number. It doesn't really matter, but you can have parameters, and the command parameter, self-explanatory, is what allows you to pass a parameter to that function if that's actually what you need. So again, very, very powerful, very, very beautiful. And we have the two main ones, the regular command and command of type T for parameters. So that's it. So thank you for watching. I hope you liked it. If you have any questions, any thoughts, any comments, please leave them at the bottom. Also, please subscribe so you're notified when the videos come out. And I will see you next time.